So we started talking about credit reports, and the credit report is really a snapshot of how you've been doing. In other words, your history of your behavior with regard to all things credit related, how many times you may have been late, are you usually on time, and I mean that's the primary thing that shows your track record, if you will, of your stuff, of all your loan related issues, and which is probably why when you don't have that kind of a track record, loan officers have, or banks have, a very hard time in approving your loan because there's no track record. They don't know what to make of you. Yes, you've paid for everything with cash, but that does not necessarily mean, on one hand, as some of you have said, well, that shows responsibility. Well, maybe, but it also shows that there is nothing to indicate how you're likely to behave with loans. And I think that's the problem. That's the problem that almost all of you will face or have faced when you start to try to get your own loan record, if you will, and you try to get a loan in your own name rather than your parents co-signing or somebody co-signing. And because when somebody co-signs your loan, they're in essence, they are taking the responsibility for you. They are saying that if you screw up, then they are going to be responsible to pay. So that makes the loans a lot safer for banks to approve. But when there's no such co-signer and there is no such track record of how you've done in the past, you're likely to get rejected for loans. So all right, so a good credit report is, of course, the best way to convince. And in fact, these days, your potential employers are also looking at credit reports with the intuition that if you have a good credit history, that shows a responsibility on your part. That shows that and that may be a good sign for you as an employer. So there's even more reason now to worry about maintaining a good credit report than before, since potential employers are also looking at your credit report. One of the things that if you see that there is some glaring mistakes in your credit file, and that happens quite a bit, then you need to work at, and especially if you know that you're coming up with a sensitive period where potential employers, as well as if you want a loan or something, that they're going to be looking at that record, then it's even more important, imperative for you to try and fix that. Unfortunately, that is a pretty difficult task, because in the credit world, you are guilty until you're until you can prove your innocence. So unlike a law or in a courtroom where you're presumed innocent till proven guilty, in the credit world, it actually works the other way around. You are presumed guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. And so that means the onus and the burden of responsibility is flatly on you to try and establish that why this creditor who has reported negative information about you is wrong. So it's then up to you to prove, and that sometimes takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, and a lot of time and so on. So that's something you may want to do if it turns out that that's going to make a difference to your job prospects and things like that. Of course, annualcreditreport.com is a website that you can go to, and they give you can actually get free credit reports once every 12 months from each of the 3 agencies, and those will be, you can simply download them, so it's very easy. And there are a lot of websites that will sort of try to trick you into saying that they'll trick you into saying and make the claim that you'll get a free report, but once you get in there, you'll see that there's lots of catches, lots of conditions and so on. Annualcreditreport.com is really a legitimate site where you can go and you can get reports, which is highly advisable. So here's the guts of a credit report. And some of you have seen it, I'm sure, your own report. How many of you have seen your own credit report? Just a quick check. Okay, so some of you, significant majority haven't. So today we have a treat for you. Maria has been prepping for this. No, I'm just kidding. Maria will walk you through her own credit file. And of course, she has taken out some of the sensitive information, as she should. But walk you through the sections of a credit report just to give you, the rest of you, a sense of what is contained in it and stuff like that. So Maria, it's all yours.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You can have this as well, if you can.
Thank you.
This one you can answer.
So identifying information.
You can answer
this
that.
section basically shows who you
Right,
are.
responsibility.
It shows your
Sure.
name, it shows where you live, so what type of residency you live in. It will have information on all the cell phone numbers you have. It will have information on your driving license. If you have a spouse, it will have information on your spouse, etc. So I'm going to show you mine. And the files I'm showing you, they're from 2011. So it most closely would represent a regular student. At that time, I had a very small credit line, only one credit card, so it can give you an idea of how it looks, essentially. So this is my Equifax. So there are 3 different credit bureaus. We have TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. So this is Equifax, and they misspelled my name. And that is one of the issues that Professor Chick already said. A lot of reports will have errors. So right now, when I entered my name, to get an annual credit report, this is the file that brings up. So if somebody tries to find me on Equifax, they will not know whether it's me or not, because the name is not exactly the same as in all my legal documents. So what I would have to do, I would have to essentially contact Equifax and say, hey, you guys have a wrong information about me. Please correct it. And then I would have to send all the documents.
Exactly what I was thinking. Not really.
Then you can see that they listed my social security number, and by that social security, that's how they matched me, that it was me, when I was trying to pull out my report. Then you can see that there's my birth date, like my age or date of birth listed, where I've been living, and they don't have anything else about me. Experian, they spelled my name correctly. They do have 3 different cell phone numbers attached. They have my year of birth, but I don't have a date, exact date of my birth.
That won't count because
and
they
then
will
in terms of
remove
where I
the
live,
credit card companies
they
will
actually take of
take it off.
residency. So I live in a house, as I say, single family. Then I lived in an apartment complex. It says apartment complex. So they do have more detailed information about you. So if a credit lender wants to see, hey, do you live in a house or you live in a dorm, etc., they will have that information. Next, that's it about Equifax. Credit history. So basically, this section of your credit report will have information on what credit you have, whether you have credit cards, whether you have a loan, etc., and how you've been maintaining it. So let's go specifically into Equifax, and it shows you that I have only one account at that time, and that account had a limit. So my credit card at that time
And you're not
had
guaranteed to
a limit
get all
of
20 points.
$750. So that was available. And you know that I'm a deadbeat from recitation, meaning that I repay my credit card in full by the end of a billing cycle. Okay? So because I'm a deadbeat, means that I don't ever get finance charges, and that's why my available credit is my credit limit, because I repay, or always repay, and that's what it shows you. So debt to credit ratio, it's one of the important ratios. The score is also determined. You see that it's 0 because I repaid it completely. Monthly payment amount, I don't pay anything because I'm a deadbeat, it's 0, and accounts with balance is 0. You can see that I have no mortgage, installments, or revolving. My revolving account is my the credit card I have, so it shows you this information. Other, nothing else is listed. So I don't have a car loan, I don't have anything else on this. So history. So now if you look on my account, whether it's revolving, if I click on it, it will give you more specific information about it. So if I click on it, it shows you that it's FATQ, that it was opened, and it gives account number. It shows you when it was opened, my balance, because I'm a deadbeat, I don't owe anything to them. This is when I was extracting this report. And it says, pays it as agreed,
debit is not
meaning
credit.
that I'm paying all the
That's
stuff,
why they're not
that I don't have any past dues. Okay, now this is Experian. So we looked, previous one was Equifax report. We're looking at Experian. And with Experian, what you can see is they actually give you a specific per month information. So if I missed the payment 30 days past due, it would be yellow, and then if it was 180 days, red, and the horse would be black. You can see all the types that they're looking at. So for me, at this account, Experian also reports that everything is okay. Next section of your credit report would be public records. Basically, it's if you filed bankruptcy, if you did not pay your tax lines, and this is really bad. If you have anything there, it looks really bad. So your score will be declined dramatically. So for me, public records, negative accounts, collections is everything zero. So that's what you want to see. Inquiries. So in terms of inquiries, you have two biggest types. You have hard inquiry and soft inquiry. Hard inquiry is when you're applying to get a credit or a loan. That would be hard inquiry. So you're requesting to run your account. It's not when you check your account. When you just do a simple credit score check, it's still considered as a soft inquiry, and that's one of the biggest myths that is commonly accepted. So if you just check your score, it's soft inquiry, it does not impact your credit score. If you're applying for a loan, it is a hard inquiry, and it does impact your credit score. So just a quick story before we move on. My sister was buying a car, and I went with her to a dealership. Why I'm telling you this story, I'll explain. And we went to a dealership, and the dealer told her, I just ran your credit score. So if you go to a different dealership, your interest rate will be much higher because I just did a hard inquiry. So you cannot go anywhere because you'll have to pay much more in interest payments. Well, luckily I was there, so I told her that it's not true. She has at least 2 weeks to go to other dealerships without impacting her credit score. So she can go to multiple ones, they can run her score, but it will count as one inquiry. So that's very important. Okay? So you have at least 2 weeks, and sometimes it counts, you can have about a month. Checking, looking for the best loan rate, for mortgages if you're trying to get one. That is really important. So inquiries, hard and soft. This is the examples of my inquiries. You have, so when you get, for example, an apartment, they can run your credit score. When you get an electricity, you know that if your score is not good, they will say, hey, give us a deposit, right? So all of those will be inquiries. Also, when you try to get a cell phone, if you don't have a good credit score, they will ask you to give you money, right? Many of you might have experienced it. So having a good credit score is really important. So all of them will be checking you, how good, how reliable you are. So you can see that multiple companies were running my score. You can see American Express, Capital One, they were checking my score quite a lot. They were sending me promotional deals all the time, trying to sign me up for one of the credit cards they have.
Debt collectors are chasing him
I did not
because
request.
debt
I did
collectors
not
want
want
money,
to
and they've already
to
reported
get a
you
Capital One or American
to the
Express
credit
card.
bureaus.
And even when I was checking
That
my
itself will
Equifax
drive down your
report, it's all
score.
soft inquiry. I did not, checking your score doesn't affect your credit score. And when somebody else checks it, when you do not request, it's still soft. I was getting a cell phone here in 2009.
When debt collectors are
I
after somebody, that
initiated it,
means
that's
that
why
it's
it was
already been
hard.
reported as bad debt. That means that
Right? So
the
typically
vendor
for
has already
FICO scores,
reported
you have
this as
30
bad
days
debt, and
buffer
so it
period
already
to
shows up
run
in your
your
credit
credit.
score.
And then hard inquiries again, it just shows you the ones that were. So if you look at your Equifax experience, sometimes it will be different because it's not reported to all the companies. In terms of errors, this is, I'm going to give it to Professor Chakravarti, but I'm going to give you one more story. My friend was buying an apartment, and his credit score was not good. So the loan officer told him, hey, your score is not good, and it shows that you missed the bill 3 years ago. It really impacts your score if you did not pay a bill. It's a negative commission on your account, and it stays for 7 years. So what my friend did, he contacted not the credit bureau, he contacted the actual agency to which he did not pay a bill. He wrote a letter saying, I never received that bill because I moved out from the apartment to which you sent that bill. And I'm gonna pay it right now. Can you please contact the credit bureau to remove it? They removed it in a matter of 1 day, and his score jumped up 100 points. It's a rare story, but it does happen. typically you will hear that it takes years to dispute your errors. But if there's something on your account that doesn't impacts it negatively, try to remove it. Try to contact the agency. Contacting credit bureau will be much harder than contacting an actual agency that put a negative information on your account. So if you can pay the bill directly with them and ask them to remove that information, that would work best for you. Okay, that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Let me, Claire, I've been watching your questions on Hot Seat, and there seems to be some confusion amongst some of you regarding debit cards and whether it impacts your credit score. Now notice the word debit and credit score are two different things. So that's the first answer, is that anything related to debit is not going to impact your credit score. Because debit is debit and credit is credit. They're two different things, not to be confused. So a debit card is nothing but, I'm looking at the wrong way. So the debit card is nothing but you writing checks. And there's nothing credit related to that. It's money that you have in your account that you're simply writing a check. Whether you're using a debit card, it's a plastic version of writing a check, it's not credit. There's nothing credit related to that. So it's not going to impact your credit card or credit score. Or yeah.
Even when you press to use it as credit? What does that
Okay, that's a good question. Now there are some cards that have the credit feature on them. So it's joint debit and credit. So if you press the credit part of it, then yes.
Okay.
Great question, yes. But if you, so yes, so typically when you slide that thing through, it will ask you whether it's a debit or credit. If you press debit, then it'll ask you for a PIN and all that, right? So then it's got nothing to do with credit. You're paying money coming out of a savings account or checking account, whatever. But if you press the credit part of it, then yes, then that was a credit transaction. That is fine. That gets good. So it depends on, yeah. Good question. All right, so yeah, and all I want to say here is that the errors that come up, it's up to you to try and fix them, because a lot of them are innocent. Well, nothing's innocent, but there are less egregious issues like misspelling your name or getting your address slightly wrong. Those are, I mean, obviously you should try to move them if you can, but for the most part, those are not going to make a big difference to, to your employers and things like that. But if you do have, some creditors who have mistakenly, a lot of times you may have a name that's fairly common, in which case somebody else's stuff may be put on your record, and those are the ones that, and especially if they're negative, then that can seriously impact your credit score, and those are the ones that you really need to take off your credit files, because they are going to drag down your score otherwise. And those are the ones that need work. You have to contact the vendor, and the easiest situation, the dream situation is you contact the vendor and they say, oh yes, my bad, yes, we will correct it, and they correct it. Unfortunately, you don't have that situation happening too many times, too often. And so that means that you have to provide evidence, they might say, whatever. Then you have to go into a back and forth with these people to try, because only the vendor that has put that negative comment to begin with can then take it back. And if that vendor, for whatever reason, refuses to do it, then your option at that point is to put in an explanatory note explaining your side of it. So when somebody checks your score and sees that negative rating, they can then read your explanation of what your side of the story is. It gives you a place where you can actually provide your side of the whole situation. So that's going to, that you can put as a way. There was another question that talked about if collectors, debt collectors are after you, is that going to affect your credit score? Okay, so here's how this deal works. When a particular merchant that you've been dealing with has sent you a bill for services rendered, and you don't pay. So let's say 30 days go by, you don't pay for whatever reason. Then you get another reminder, 60 days, you don't pay. You get another third reminder, 90 days go by. At that point, usually all vendors I know, including hospitals and clinics and all that, they will sell those as bad debt. Those get sold. So clinics and everybody else, the bad debts get sold to a third party that buy off these debts at pennies to a dollar. And then the merchant, whoever it was, initially is out of the picture. Then the debt collectors get in on this. So this is an investment for them, right? They paid a portion of that debt to buy those debts off themselves. If they can collect, then they get to make money on their investment, which is that they paid to buy off these bad debts. This is how the system works. So then the calls that you get are those companies that have bought the bad debts from your initial merchant that you didn't pay the bills for. They simply sell the bills. They simply sell these as bad debts. They get it off their books. Take whatever they can get from these companies that buy off their debt. So let's say it's a $100 bill that they couldn't collect from you, and let's say they sell that debt to a debt collection company for $20. Well, that's $20 more than the zero that they had from you. So they take that $20 and adjust their accounting books accordingly and move on. They're out of the picture at that point. They don't care after that. Now the debt collection company that has bought that debt, now they take it upon themselves to call you and make your life as miserable as they possibly can. They can't do a whole lot of these. They can't come to your door, for example. They can't send big beefy guys to your door. That's unlawful. I mean, that's illegal. All they can do is really call you with whatever, as many phone numbers as they have of you. They'll call you if they have your work number. They'll call you at work. They'll call you at home. They'll call you at a friend. Whatever numbers they can get of you from wherever, they will use that to call and make your life miserable. So that's all they can do to recover. And if they can then somehow manage to get money, some money out of you, then that's, as long as it's more than what they paid to buy the debt, well, that's a return on their investment. And that's how this process works. So when the initial company sells your loan as a bad loan, that's the point at which they report it to the credit. It's automatic. It gets reported to the credit bureau or bureaus as a bad loan. That shows up right there as a bad debt, dragging down your score at that point. After that, when the debt collection companies start calling you, your scores have already been impacted by then. It's already done. That happens at the time the initial merchant declares this a bad loan and sells it off and then reports it automatically to the credit bureau. So just wanted to walk you through that chain of how it happens. So Maria talked about these, the 2-week window, and so I won't go over these. It helps to close old accounts. Yes, I've talked about this, and some of you have talked about this as well, that it is, I've always said that if you have a credit card that you're not using, it's best to close it. And there are two sides to this argument. When you close an account, the good thing is that you free up your your debt to equity ratio, or your debt ratio, your debt ratio gets lowered. In other words, when you close an account, let's say a credit card with a $5,000 account, credit line, then that $5,000 gets removed and your debt-bearing ability increases because your debt ratio goes down. That's a good thing. The bad thing is that in the short run, your credit score also comes down a few points. And a lot of people will say, oh, well, but that's a bad thing. Well, it is and it isn't. When I've talked to loan officers about this, there's always this, I've always gotten back the clear answer that, yes, scores go down, but we'd rather prefer a person having less loan than more loan. So people who do these credit checks and work for banks and all that, they're not stupid. They make those calculations, and the benefit will go in your favor if you have closed these accounts and freed up your debt-bearing capacity, even if it comes at the expense of a few lower credit score temporarily. So in balance, it's the better thing to do. So you know that, yes, some of these stay for a fairly long time. That's a common myth. Co-signing doesn't mean you're responsible for an account. Yes, it is. In fact, as I told you, co-signing simply means you are taking, it's a legal document you're signing that says that if the original person misses a payment or skips town, they're coming after you. And you've allowed, by co-signing, allowed that possibility to happen. And so yes, you are taking on a huge responsibility when you co-sign. Paying off, yeah. It's not that simple. Paying off a debt does, so the credit score is a complex algorithm which we don't know for obvious, and we've talked about that. We don't know how many points get added or subtracted. If we knew that, we could game the system, and so we don't know that. There's no way to guess that, and if somebody tells you that this is what it is, they're lying to you. They don't know either. So what you can do is pay your bills on time. I cannot emphasize that enough. That's the single most factor that drags down your credit score. Try to pay your bills in time. Even if you're making a partial payment, pay it on or before the due date. Even 1 day late means you're late. 1 day late means you're late. So if you have enough, 5 or 6 1-day lates, pretty soon that's a significant mark on your credit score. Yes? I don't know that. It shows up. So there is a statement that says usually pays in time. And that's where it'll hit you. Is that if you say usually is late, that has a problem. And that's the part I'm referring to. Okay. Is there any questions I need to look at? No, can you point me?
Just do a hot start, yeah.
Student loans do not affect your report because while you're a student, you are really, that thing is frozen. You're not. It's only when the clock starts and you're supposed to pay back, that's when things become interesting. If you miss payments and things like that. So student loans are not going to affect your score one way or another while you're a student. Yes, I've actually had some trouble getting approved for a credit card because of my lack of credit. Are there ways to improve? Yes, there is a way to establish or simulate or manufacture, if you will, a credit history, which is the easiest way that I know and that I've done myself when I was a grad student and after I quit being a grad student, and is that you take out a loan that you don't really need. And you make good faith, effort on paying that off in a year, 18 months, whatever, making sure you always make the payments in time, and thereby you manufacture a credit history. That's the easiest way I know that you can create a track record of good credit loan payment. So take a small loan out of a bank. Sometimes if you don't have a record, a bank will allow you to take money out by freezing a part of your savings account. So let's say you have $5,000 in your savings account. The bank will allow you to take out a $5,000 loan, but they will block that $5,000 in your savings account because you won't be able to touch it while the loan is outstanding. And then you pay it back over a period of whatever, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, whatever the loan terms are. And then if you do that, and you are thereby creating a track record. You're artificially, if you will, creating a track record. And that usually will help you getting your first credit card. So that's the one way I know that works. Okay, 8 ways to lock your cards away. Again, this is, don't close all of your accounts. So close some that you need, but keep some of them. And there's no hard and fast mathematical rule here. There's no equation that tells you the magic number. But obviously, if you are in trouble, one of the ways to prevent getting yourself deeper in debt is to not use those cards for a while. Maybe cancel some of them, free up some of the cap room, your debt room there. Budgeting is a very important way to figure out where you stand financially. How much are you bringing in? How much you're spending? It's it's a common sense thing. I mean, there's nothing magical about budgeting, right? It's just an accounting procedure that, and you've done this exercise in class, or at least you're still doing it, I think, with maintaining your expenses, and that's a great habit, a personal habit to have if you don't have one already, is to get in this habit of recording your expenses and keeping track of how much money is coming in versus how much you're spending. And even if there's not a whole lot coming in right now as a student, keeping track of your expenses is an eye-opener. I've heard so many stories over the years of students telling me, gosh, I never realized I was spending that much money on Jakes every month. And it's amazing. When you see it on paper, it's hard to deny, because human beings, behaviorally, we are very, and myself included, we are well programmed to be in denial. We can be in denial all day long, and I'm no different from you guys in that regard. But when you see it written down in front of you in black and white, it's hard to deny it. And so writing down these things can help you understand that, my God, I'm spending 80% or whatever, $500 in Jakes every month. Maybe that's too much. I don't know about you, but so you may be more conscious of how you and where you're spending your money. So that's a good exercise in itself. Pay more than the minimum. So with credit cards, and this is with the new credit card laws that have gone into effect a few years ago, this is one of the things that was hugely contested by companies, by credit card companies, that one of the things that's there is that there's a little statement there that says, if you pay this amount at the minimum required amount, this is how long it's going to take you to pay off your loan. That is meant as a wake-up call to you. And this is something that the credit card industry didn't want included. But it is there, and that tells you how much in interest you're going to be paying to pay off your loan if you just pay off the minimum required, which is about 4% of your balance now. It used to be 2%, it's been increased to 4%. So try to pay more than that, because the longer you take to pay off, the more interest costs you're paying. And so it could well be that for a $500 item that you bought, you could have paid 5, 6, 7 times its amount by the time you get done paying it. Ask yourself, is that worth it? If you ended up paying $3,000 in interest costs over a thing that cost you $500, is that worth it for you? So those are kind of things that you need to be careful about. Move the balance to lower interest cards. You'll frequently see a lot of teaser rates, right, that come your way. It might be in your mailbox. It'll say 0 interest rate if you transfer balance for 6 months or a year. Those are great places to move your money. At least you get breathing room for 6 months or a year, and then move to another card or whatever. I mean, I've had students tell me they used to make it into a form of art, where you jump from one to another card to another, and keeping that 0 interest rate thing alive. So, but in any case, sometimes that helps. That gives you a breathing room. But these are teaser rates usually, so you got to be careful about what's going to happen after that period is over. It's going to jump to a very high rate, and your best bet is to move it out of that account before that day hits. To try to minimize the household debt paradox. If you have a large savings account or a relatively healthy savings account and you've got a large credit card debt, try to use one to pay off the other, or pay off most of the other as much as you can. Borrow against life insurance. If you have a life insurance policy with a whole life type policy, we'll talk about insurance in the next module, so we'll discuss this more, but you can borrow against your life insurance policy. Certain types of life insurance policies, which we'll talk about very soon. That's one way. This is another one. If you happen to have home equity, if you have a house that has some equity in it, you can actually take out a home equity loan. So it's called a second mortgage on the house, and you can get that. And the advantage of that is it's a decent rate, very relatively low rate, and you can use it to do whatever you want. And the interest that you pay on the home equity loan is tax deductible. So in your taxes. So that's an added advantage. But this only works if you have a home, B, if you have home equity, if you have equity in that home. Borrow from 401k, that's usually the last resort, but if you have to, that's another place you can borrow it from. That's a retirement plan. We'll talk about that soon. And then this one usually works. Renegotiate the terms of your loan with your creditors. You'll be surprised sometimes if you call them and try to renegotiate or adjust your terms and payment terms and all that. Credit card companies will usually work with you on that because it's more costly for them to not do so. It's much more costly for them to not work with you. So they will work with you out of their own self-interest and trying to work with you to find a balance which works for you. So that's something that you should try out. Pertinent information in credit file we talked about. If the mistakes or inaccuracies in your file are fairly egregious, then you should certainly try to add pertinent information. If the merchant that you're contesting this item with or payments with is not playing ball, not agreeing to take it off the negative mark, then you can at least add information from your side into your file. And if all else fails, file for bankruptcy. There are two chapters in the consumer that we as consumers can file under Chapter 7 and Chapter 13 of the U.S. Bankruptcy Code, and we will talk about that, I think. Yes, right here. So Chapter 7 and Chapter 13, those are the two ways you can file for bankruptcy. Chapter 7 is the more serious one. It's called, this one is where you essentially walk away. So this is a more serious version of bankruptcy. Chapter 13 is called reorganization. This one pretty much says that I'm done. I don't want to deal with this anymore. And so generally a court-appointed trustee will look at everything, all what you have versus how much you owe to whoever, and they'll try to find a way to pay off everybody. Not everything gets taken off with if you file for this, it's not going to solve all your problems. Let me make that clear. Alimony payments don't get taken off by bankruptcy. You can't get out of paying alimony and child support by filing for bankruptcy. A lot of people try and it doesn't work. You cannot get out of paying taxes by filing for bankruptcy. So the government will not go away just because you filed for bankruptcy, and neither will your obligations to support your child or whatever through child support and all that stuff will go. That will not go away either. But a lot of your credit card debts and things like that will go away. Okay. Chapter 13 is the wage earner plan. So this is a relatively less, sort of less traumatic version, if you will, of the bankruptcy stuff. This is really called a reorganization. This is where you don't really lose anything, or your court-appointed person will work out a plan, a payment plan. And the idea is that if you make this payment plan diligently for 24 months or 36 months, then at the end of it, you will emerge debt-free and you'll be done. So that's sort of the so United, are we going to pull that up? It's loading. Okay. So percentage change in bankruptcy filing between 2011 and 12.
So the darker states had fewer people.
Yeah, so decline of less than 8%. Northern Indiana, yay. The rest of Indiana is better. So this declined. So more than less than 8% versus more than 8%. But this is the change. Do we have the absolute numbers?
Absolute numbers.
The other one?
I think when you click on the state, it shows the actual numbers.
Yeah. So.
All right. So let's look at, if you want, Colorado, Indiana Northern. Do we have the percentage by state, the one we used to show?
Oh no, I don't have that.
That one. Okay, that's gone. No problem. Okay. So, well, decline of more than 16%, so the darker ones, and then decline, the lighter colors are where the decline from year to year was less than 8%. I don't know what's magical about 8%, but somehow that seems to be important. Okay. National changes in filings. Okay. Right, we're getting better. Right. From 2008 and 9 onwards, it's gotten better. So that's the good news, is that less people are filing for bankruptcy year to year. That's good news. Okay. So now, where was the rules? Remember we talked about it's become difficult to file for bankruptcy now? Chapter 7. So there was a new rule that was not new anymore. It's been a few years. That has actually made it more difficult to file for Chapter 7. And what that does is that there used to be the case that you could file for 7 or 13. Now, after the passage of that law, it turns out that it's much more difficult to file for Chapter 7. It's easier to file for Chapter 13. And so you're only eligible to file for Chapter 7 now if your income happens to be less than the median income of the state you live in. Median income. So median is the central location, central tendency of the distribution of income. So if your income happens to be less, then you can file under Chapter 7 still. But if your income happens to be more than the median number for the state you're a resident of, then you are unable to file for Chapter 7. You are disqualified. You can only file for Chapter 13. This was another thing that was hugely fought over by the credit card industry, and this was successful. They were successful in passing this one. The idea was that, why was this passed? And why did this bill have huge support from the credit industry? Because the claim was that too many people are gaming the system. Too many people are filing for Chapter 7 to just get out of debt. You know, you behave irresponsibly, you rack up huge debts, and then you file for Chapter 7, walk away, and let everybody else pick up the pieces. So that was the feeling, that whether you believe it or not, that was how the interpretation was done. And so the idea was that they were not going to allow an easy filing of Chapter 7. So you have to be really poor by their definition to be able to file for Chapter 7. Poor being defined by if your income happens to be less than the median income for that state. Then you are eligible, else you are not. You are not poor enough to file for Chapter 7 anymore. So that was a law that was passed a few years ago. Okay. So this is a quick one. I will go through it, breeze through it. People generally tell you, so this is a national survey that was done not too long ago about budgetary habits of Americans and managing finances. So about 2/3 said roughly that they use a budget. 1/3 roughly, or less than a third, say they modify or change their budgets. Because remember, with budgets, it's not just making the budget, right? You have to keep it up. You have to update it. You have to, and so that's as important as making the budget. So, and just over a third report that they don't use a budget. That's a good news, bad news scenario, right? So what are some of the benefits of budgeting? Let's just quickly walk you through these. They're pretty obvious, common sense 101, but sometimes, you know, common sense is something with, and I'm no exception to that, we tend to ignore, or, you know. So awareness, control, organization, communication, opportunities. You can see opportunities. If you know how much you're saving, you can see opportunities. It gives you extra time when you're doing your taxes and all that. You have all the information already collected, ready to go. You don't have to, you know, frantically go through your shoebox, finding receipts and things. Extra money. You can, if you've been diligent and you have a record of it, you can squeeze out extra money that you never knew you had. And so that's a good thing, right? So budget, and that's why we encourage budgeting. In this class, we at least want to create that habit. If you don't have that habit, we want to create it in this class, so hopefully you'll continue with that after your semester is over and you've moved on with Purdue, or moved on, you know, graduated and moved on. It's a habit you should continue to maintain. So here's a quick financial IQ survey, national survey. 65% consider themselves relatively or highly knowledgeable. 67%, so 2/3, either didn't know or incorrectly responded when asked to define a good credit score. So look at the discrepancy, behavioral bias, if you will. So 65% think they're highly knowledgeable. 67% cannot tell you what the good credit score is. That's a problem, right? 54% wrongly stated that age is a factor considered in determining credit scores, which is obviously false. So we may feel we know a lot, but it turns out when you dig down, we don't really. That's the moral of this survey. Okay, so I just wanted to, I always tell people that the reason I show this is because I was quoted in this on the top of this article. You can see that the under 21 population is vulnerable. They don't think that far ahead. They live for the moment. They feel invincible, like it can't happen to me. For that quote, I was named, and so I showed it to you. Blatant self-promotion.